Well, good evening, gentlemen. Thank you for joining me. Well, this morning, this evening, and this very late this evening, isn't it for you, Stacy? What time's over there in Canada?
11 o'clock. Yeah, almost midnight.
Yep. And Mark, it's what
6 p.m. 6 p.m. the next day.
Yes.
Paul, what time is it for you, Paul?
7 minutes. 9 minutes past 7.
Oh,
so 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock. So yeah, we were going to go for an hour earlier, but Stacy was very kind and said, I can go a bit later. So I got a little bit longer in bed.
Yeah, good.
And yeah, 1 a.m. for Millbilly, but obviously we might.
That's lunchtime for Millbilly, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. And the good news was the Packers did win yesterday. They won very, very handsomely. They beat the Tennessee Titans 40 points to 14. So
there you go.
They go from strength to strength. They're playing absolutely superbly at the moment.
Have they finished their their divisional game?
Oh yeah. They're Green Bay are the champions. But as Millbilly pointed out, it's all about winning the last few games so that you get home advantage in the sort of next few games. But yeah, I mean, the better they play, the more you think, should maybe put some money on them. But then the odds drop and drop and drop, so maybe not.
Yeah, no.
So, anyway, I suppose we couldn't really start off without just a wee sort of toast to the dude. So,
well,
Mark, how are you coping without the dude?
Well, my shares in Dr. Pepper have plummeted.
Yeah,
that's probably been the biggest impact. So no, you certainly notice his absence. That's for sure.
Yes, yeah.
And I think we always will, to be honest.
Yeah.
So, as I think I mentioned to you, Paul and Stacy, in just private chat, I've got something a little going on in the background to honor Richard in the new year. So we'll talk more about that as we get a bit closer. So just something work in progress. So
yeah, I did speak to Auntie in California. Was it yesterday or the day before? She said about that, and I said, well, that's great. We'll get Mark to talk about it nearer the time. So
yeah, that's great. Yeah, but you sure do notice his the absence online. What a void. And Paul, you've been doing great, keeping up. Doing your best. And but the drive and it culminates with the sort of timing of the not much happening in the case. So we're all and also United States politics has taken a front seat almost worldwide for the last few months. So
is that what you call it? Politics?
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
I'm going to stay away from those. No. But so hopefully in the new year here we have some news and we can get back online and start refocusing.
Indeed, I'm sure that'll be the case. So,
can I remind you? So, can I just pop this up just to remind us of the last time we were all together? So, Mark, you carry on.
We're just going to mention slightly out of tune to what we're talking about, but God, look at those two handsome guys.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Where's Stacy and me? So,
yes, where were you? And when was that taken?
That's over a year ago, that photo.
Yes.
Just from memory, I think it was October 20th. But I'm just.
Oh, yes, spot on. Wow, you've got a photographic memory.
That's right.
And since it's Stacy and I in the photo, someone had to be taking it, so I figure that's you.
Yes.
And therefore, we're in Scotland.
We are indeed. Any idea where these iconic cliffs are?
St. Abs.
Correct.
Cliff.
That's why we're in the photo, because Stacy and I just got such great abs. That's the appropriate spot to take the photo.
And if you were to jump into the water, into the North Sea, and swim straight across as if you were swimming from, across Lake Michigan from Manitowoc to Uddingston, where would you? Uddingston? No, Luddington. Uddingston is an area just outside Glasgow. Sorry, Luddington. You know the Badger, the SS Badger. It goes straight across from Manitowoc. If you were to do the same from St. Abbs, where would you end up?
I'd probably say Denmark.
Correct.
Very good, Mark.
And of course, in Denmark,
in geography at high school.
Yeah, so. As the dude would point out, if you were to go to Denmark, everybody there would be speaking Dutch. Is that right?
That's what he thought. Yes,
that's what he thought.
And if everyone else thinks that, well, then that's true.
Of course,
a bit like
it is.
A bit like some of the stuff in the Avery Dassey cases.
Yeah.
So.
But in actual fact, no, everybody in Denmark doesn't speak Dutch. Most people in the Netherlands, they speak Dutch. But in Denmark, they speak Danish.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think about Richard, I can hear his laugh, right now.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah,
it seems like, doesn't it seem like such a long time ago, though?
It does, yes.
It just, it's 4 months or something.
August the 1st, yeah.
Well, almost 5, I guess. Almost 5.
Yeah, nearly 5 months. Yeah. So.
Just a crazy year 2020 hasn't it been?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Very unusual year to state the obvious, and it's made us reflect a lot. Put it that way. So yeah. What?
It must be different for you because this is probably the least amount of traveling you've done in the last.
Yeah, that's right. I actually managed to jump on a flight down to Melbourne a week or two ago, and just actually going into the airport was a bit weird. That was a bit strange indeed. So, but I'm hoping that sometime in maybe spring, with a bit of luck, I might be able to travel. But we'll see. Yeah. Spring your time, I mean, not my time. So,
right. Yeah. Hey, Mark, have you talked to Stephen lately?
I have actually. I've spoken to him quite a lot. He rang me on Christmas Day. Christmas Day my time. It was Christmas evening, afternoon his time. He's really full of beans and very up and very excited about things for the new year. And I've spoken to him probably in the last few weeks. I've spoken to him at least a couple of times a week, in each week. So. He's good, real good, and he's been, as we've seen on postings, he's been in regular contact with Kathleen Zellner as well. So she's speaking to him, I think, just about every week now. So, so it's good. And he always says, even though I know it's hard to kind of connect to this, he always says, "Oh, tell everyone I miss them and can't wait to have the party when I get out." And well, you can see what he writes when he sends those supporter cards that Sandy posts.
Yeah.
That really is how Stephen thinks. If you read what he writes, that is how he is.
Right.
Just full of little joyous moments. That's the sort of man that he is. So,
that's great.
Yeah.
So, Trace, Stacey, can I just ask then? So, when Kathleen Zellner, she does like Zoom conferences with Steve, but with you, it's phone calls. So you're not really able to go into the depths of the case. Am I right in saying that?
Well, firstly, I think it's possible for Stephen to have Zoom contact with other people, such as me, but he's not that technology savvy. It's not something that he's 100% comfortable with. But because when he has conversations with Kathleen, she's obviously his attorney and her conversations are confidential. And so she makes the effort of making sure that technology does, in fact, work for him.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, when it comes to people like me and others, he talks to many people, but he's just, a prison officer will come around and say, "Anybody want the phone?" It's like a handheld, wireless phone, and they'll go, "Yeah," right? And then he'll start ringing. and he might only have the phone for a short period of time, and so it's not really he's not really designed to go and sit in front of a computer or all that sort of stuff. But that effort is made when it comes to conversations with Kathleen Zellner. So yeah.
I'm a bit concerned when you said it's a phone that gets handed round, because if there's one great way of spreading COVID, that would be it, wouldn't it? Eh?
Yeah. Well, I don't really know the answer to this, but I don't think there's too many people in the prisons who haven't had COVID, right?
Right.
Stephen's had it, so I think they're pretty much all gone through them, and I don't think there's been many people died from it, although I suspect across the state there's probably been a few prisoners. May have, but but generally speaking, I think it's pretty much okay now. So could be wrong there, but Stephen never mentions it, and but they're not allowed to have visitors yet, so that's a bit of a worry for them. So they can't have visitors. So yeah.
Hopefully 2021 is going to be good for Stephen and Brendan, and this time next year, can we imagine what this time next year we're going to be having a chat, and what are we going to talk about?
Stephen talks about all the things he's going to be doing, right? He doesn't talk about. He obviously is mindful of his case, but he talks about all the stuff he's going to do. Like, his primary focus is to be there for his mum and dad. That's like number one and number two and number three. Yeah. That's the primary thing for his mum and dad. And so hopefully, that'll be soon if things go well. I'm still reasonably confident that they may just release him. They might try to, they might sort of order a new trial and then kind of delay it. But if that's the case, he should be a suitable applicant for a release on bond. And he may get released on bond with all the usual restrictions. Because if they vacate his convictions, that means he's not convicted anymore. So he should be a candidate for a bond.
So Mark, if I can just take you back though, I mean, when I talk to people about making a murderer, so a lot of them are saying, are they still locked up? Are they still inside? It's like my question would be for you two guys. How is it that we're still here 5 years after Making a Murderer first came out, and we're still talking about Stephen Brendan, and they're still locked up? How has that come about?
I'll let Stacy go first.
Well, I think just because public awareness is raised, they always say the wheels of justice turn slowly, and with appellate court, it's even more so. So once you're convicted in the United States, it's very difficult. To be honest, if it wasn't for Making a Murderer, neither of them would have a home, I don't think. And so, for us, I mean, I always reflect on the fact that, we've been here 5 years, some of us, and they've been in there triple that, or what, so it's it's a reference point. But I try not to focus on that. I just think, I really try and focus on seeing them get out this next year, and I'm wishing that sort of stuff. So
there's about 2.5 years that has been deliberate resistance. So part of the length of time that we're still here is because, particularly in the lower courts, they're dealing with the post-conviction relief petitions. They've deliberately resisted and haven't allowed justice to unfold, which is post-relief considerations is part of the justice system. And irrespective of what the ultimate outcome is, the reason why it's taken so long is that resistance. It shouldn't be like that.
I can hear Richard jumping in there saying, and it was them saying that Kathleen was delaying, remember? And but that's the case. You're right, Mark. It's actually, and I wouldn't be surprised if that delay tactic continues at every level they can do it.
Yeah. And I'm not sure what it really achieves for them, to be honest. It does remind me of that case that's out or that documentary's out on Netflix. Paul, correct me if I'm wrong there. I think it's called 19th. Is that what it's called? 19th? Where that guy was, wrongfully convicted, was released. His petition was, his post-conviction petition was awarded, and his conviction was vacated. The state said that they were going to retry him, and they released him on bond. He had a ankle bracelet and all that usual stuff. But I think it went for 2 years, or maybe nearly 3 years, without this new trial coming up. And ultimately, there was a change in district attorney in the area, and they had an election. There was a new district attorney who was taking over. The old district attorney decided to retire a month before the new district attorney was to take office, so they had to appoint a temporary district attorney. And that temporary district attorney made the statement that they weren't going to retry this gentleman.
Yep.
But in the same breath, then went on to basically state that he was guilty, and we still believe he's guilty. Blah blah blah. So they just they wouldn't let the justice process unfold.
Dr. Silkman online there says it's trial 4.
Trial 4, that's right. Yeah. Trial 4, and it was Sean Ellis.
I have not seen that yet.
Yeah,
worth a look. It's definitely worth a look. At the parallels to Stephen's case are remarkable.
I actually stay away from it, to be honest, on purpose. I know how I am. Maybe I will.
I think the trial 4 refers to his 4th trial. That's
wow.
That was his. So So I'm not that that's the benchmark, of course, but it's certainly worth thinking about. But I don't know why, if the appeal court vacates his original convictions, I don't see why he wouldn't be entitled to be released on bond. He would have been, if he had the money, he would have been released on bond in his original trial. Mm-hmm. So I don't see why they should resist it now. So we're voyeurs in a way, right? We're just watching from afar. And I look at strategies, and I'm close to the United States, and I pay attention to their political system, and it's a real intrigue of what's going to happen, because we kind of talk about it by everyone playing by the rules and stuff, and there's so many more dynamics than backroom, and so it's going to be an interesting year, really. There has to be a decision coming up. I mean, it just has to be. And that's when things will get really interesting for me to see what the response is. And also then it gets punted back into the public realm again. Yes.
And so, oh man, it's just going to be an interesting year,
The one thing it might seem a little bit naive. I don't think it is. I just cannot see the appeal court dismissing the petition. I mean, there's more than adequate merit in the application, and at the very minimum, you should get an evidentiary hearing. Right. But realistically, there's enough Brady violations to vacate the petition, the conviction, and he should get a new trial. Mm-hmm. So, if that is the truth, and time will tell, for the state or whomever I don't feel like the appeal courts are going to be as let's say, suspect as some of the lower courts. And so you may as well get on with this issue. It's not going to go away just by delaying it. And but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
To be honest, it was probably 2.5, 3 years ago when it was first pointed out to me that this is probably what's going to happen, that the state are just going to try and mess about with Kathleen Zellner, having her go to the appellate court and then having to go back to the circuit court to Angela. And that's exactly what we've seen, I can't help thinking that one of the main problems here is that Tom Fallon, Norm Garner and Mark Wiegert are facing serious jail time for their handing back of this evidence. Because that's never happened before. Or at least nobody's ever been caught handing back these, something as important as the bones to the family. When you think Norm Garn was part of the team that wrote the statute.
Yeah,
that statute came about.
It's going to be interesting how they field that, but I just am so jaded with that criminal justice system that you just feel that they're going to get away. They seem to. You wonder when it's going to catch up with them. It hasn't yet.
Yeah.
It's been a long time, but
well, I think they're like Paul. They'll do it in a way that they will try to claim immunity, that they're just dumb, right? That's what they'll try to do, and I think that's their likely scenario. And they'll do what they did in that trial 4 thing, and basically say, "Oh, we're not going to retry him, even though we believe he's guilty." That's basically where they'll sit. I think their position.
Yeah. I think that's their end game. I think it's going to be Stephen got out on a technicality.
Yeah.
From our point of view, we had it right, but something went wrong, and that's where it'll, for Stephen's freedom, he's probably going to take and then they can go from there with the civil or whatever,
Yeah, they'll make a civil claim after that. Yeah, so.
But that seems like where I would, that's where I look and I go, oh, that's probably, they'll never admit. I mean, they're going to never admit that they were wrong or did anything nefarious or anything like that. So.
But because the appeal court is ruling on the district, or the district. No, what do you call? What's the lower courts called in Wisconsin?
Circuit court.
Circuit court. They're effectively ruling on the previous judges' ruling. So they're obviously going to end up saying, no, this matter did deserve either an evidentiary hearing or blah 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 blah. Right. So there's going to be. And then you've got to ask yourself the question, or the general public is, well, why didn't the circuit court permit an evidentiary hearing? So well, we know the answer to that, of course. So the benefit of the Court of Appeals is you then have their decision on the record, right? That's what it's actually then a matter of the record. Yeah. So they need to be very careful what they say in ruling, both positively or negatively for Stephen. They have to give justification for their decision, and that can then be pulled apart if it's not done well. So, yeah.
I mean, the thing is, I suppose it's up to the state to then, if you say that they sort of let Steve out on this sort of technicality that we think he's guilty, that shuts down the possibility of them investigating further as to what happened to Teresa. But do you think Kathleen Zellner would allow no one to be held accountable?
Well, that's not her role.
I realise that, but she seems pretty determined to want to find out what really happened.
Yes, well, I'm sure she is, but she has no standing to bring a prosecution against someone. Yeah. What she has is the ability to present reasonable doubt on Stephen's case. So I don't think, my personal belief is that no one will ever be found ultimately accountable for Teresa's death because there are too many people tied up in this web of deceit. They're not going to, they're probably not going to, put each other in the poo. So,
and I think it's going to be the same for Stephen's incarceration or the frame job or the lack of investigation, however you want to frame it. It'll be the same thing. There'll be an investigation. This will drag on. No one will be held accountable, or if someone is, it'll be the first one that dies out of the group before, that type of thing. And so that's the real issue here. And it's what got me involved in the case was when you see an abuse of power. So to me, so blatant. How do you go about, and it takes people like us and the rest of the supporters and viewers and the artists like Moira and Rick Yardy to do something. It's a real big thing for so many times in this sort of TV culture that we have. We're sitting back and watching, and it takes a lot to stand up. So that's the one thing I love about Making a Murderer did for me, is it empowered me.
Yes, I agree. I mean, having a much deeper and engaged knowledge of the criminal justice system in the US, this is Stephen's case is really, as we know now, the tip of the iceberg in terms of wrongful convictions. And for me, I mean, obviously, I'm like all of us want to see Stephen and Brendan out, but I'd be subtly and slightly disappointed if we didn't get meaningful criminal justice reform as a result of what happened, because it doesn't stop the same thing happening again. And to me, the biggest piece of reform, there's a few items, but the biggest one is removing the immunity issues for prosecutors, because it's that immunity issue that gives them the courage to behave improperly. So,
and I also saw a tweet from Steve today, one of them, Drizzen and Laura Nyrider, about the real reform needed and how interrogations of all criminals, not just juveniles, but how they, there has to be a change of a mentality now, and maybe this will be, maybe all this stuff going on in the States will instigate a real change, but hard to say. I still think the best way forward is we get a pay-per-view and we brain fingerprint them all. I mean, that's just
yeah, that'll be fun. Yeah,
that would.
Let's brain fingerprint them all. That's a good idea. You should write a song about that. You should write a song about that.
Yeah, I should.
Yeah. In fact, I'm hoping your guitar is handy somewhere, Stacy, before we finish in this chat. So,
it's not really. It is back.
Oh, don't get strange.
Don't get strange. I haven't played for so
long. You know, we all live on
Avery
Avery Road, Stace.
What's that?
We all live on Avery Road, so don't get strange.
I actually, I have to book Mark Atkinson in advance, and so he asked me last year, "Do you want some time next year?" And I said, "Okay." So it's coming up in January here, but I really don't have anything. I'm not like that. The stuff is either in me or it's not. So I haven't actually really been playing music for the last month or so.
Oh, you've been too busy.
Yeah, but even then, it's not in you. It's just like, oh yeah. Hey, but Paul, you've been playing a lot. That's nice. I love that stuff you're posting.
Well, it was just the fact that I had to do a lot of work on the competition for the end of October. So then I thought, well, I might as well just try and keep going, and so I'm working on some new stuff. So I wanted to just go back though to this scenario whereby, as you say, if Stephen is sort of let out on a technicality, there's no investigation into what happened to Teresa. What would be the implications of Steve being let out on a technicality for Brendan?
Well, when we say technicality, that would be a subjective view. You're let out because there is reasonable doubt, or he wasn't given a fair trial, so his conviction is vacated. That's not a technicality. That's just a conviction vacated. They might like to describe it that way, but that's not what it is. The implications, well, if Stephen's, in my view, if Stephen's in appeal, if Stephen's case is vacated, that's going to put a huge pressure on the state to let Brendan out, because they're supposedly committed this crime together, right? So I don't know how you can justify keeping him there. So
No, it won't be a technicality on illegally, but like you say, that's how they'll frame it.
Yeah.
Because as we notice in the United States, well, in all countries, the media kind of dictates what the narrative is. And so, and especially in Stephen's case, even that recent Post-Crescent article, it completely, in my personal view, it was completely slanted towards the state side. It was always giving sort of backing to the state's narrative, and that's what's going to happen. They seem to have, the way they give Ken Kratz that time a couple of years ago. He was getting still news conferences, and the media scrum was around him. You just, as an objective, I'm biased obviously, but as like an outside United States, a Canadian, I just go, how does that happen? This guy he's resigned in disgrace, and they're still fawning over him like he's something special. And for me, I go, it's because they're all linked. That's how the narrative that they get out wants, regardless of what it says on the legal papers, So.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. They all have connected culpability.
Right. Yeah.
Whether it's direct or indirect, whether it's ethical or moral, it's all connected culpability, and they're keeping their head. It's no coincidence that people like Garn and Fallon and Kratz and Fassbender and Wiegert are nowhere to be heard. That's no coincidence.
No.
So.
It's funny because Mark Wiegert once wrote, I think in an email or something, I stand 100% behind the work.
That's right.
And I go, oh yeah, let's see how let's see how that stands up.
Exactly. I thought that was a great quote because when that was before we even knew about the CD that had been held in Tom's possession and the handing back of the phones and all this other stuff, and he's saying he stands behind that. But just going back to obviously the post-Crescent, I do have a certain sympathy for some journalists in the fact that if you're in the middle of if you're a journalist covering Wisconsin and Manitowoc and Calumet in particular, you do have to be careful about doing. I suppose what John Farrak was excellent. He just went in there, like a bulldog, and just was determined to get to the truth of everything. For some of the other local journalists, you do wonder about their sort of sensibilities. As John Farrak once pointed out himself, as a journalist in Wisconsin, you don't go telling all the local readers your football team is rubbish.
Right. Yeah.
Especially when you're in rural Wisconsin, because the great majority of Wisconsin is rural.
Yes.
And there's small counties, so people know each other.
Yeah.
Even Green Bay is fairly small, relatively, and it's so people are very highly connected. And then you have this added system where they vote for their sheriff and they vote for their district attorney and they vote for their judges and so on. I mean, these are all very connected roles.
Yeah, but that I do understand that de facto is the case, but it's and in news is now entertainment, and it shouldn't be, and it shouldn't be about how many papers you sell and stuff. It should be about reporting. And so, John Farrak did. I mean, he wrote stories that we liked because it held our point of view. But I think there's a real need worldwide now for real journalists, investigative journalists. There's some great ones out there, and I'm sure certain they do a lot. But there's a lot of them that just tote the company that they work for as line, and
and they're subject to editorial adjustment, right? So if you're the owner of the Green Bay whatever newspaper, and you have an editorial bias one way or the other, you're going to filter the stories. That's what happens. So.
Well, Stacy, if I can just jump in there and just sort of just veer off just slightly for a moment. I remember many years ago watching a documentary, and it was discussing why it is that you've got, north of the border into Canada, you've got the same gun laws as you've got down in America. Why is it that in America there is so much violence? And they went through a whole raft of things that were the problem. They were saying it's because of the death penalty. No, other countries have death penalties. You don't have anywhere near so much shootings and stuff. Then it was to do with PlayStations and shooting games and all that. And it's like no, other countries have that. What their conclusion is what you've just said. It was down to journalism. They discovered that the quality journalism north of the border was so much higher that proper things were being discussed, and it wasn't just all about us. How many people were shot today, and it's a difficult one. But that was one of the things that they focused on.
The thing is once you have that journalistic quality go down, it's a slippery slope, because then the quality goes down, and all of a sudden the papers are getting driven around by, like Mark said, money really and power. So, and that's really what, to be on. I don't like being a jaded person or conspiracy theorist or whatever, but really when you see the coverage of at that time of Stephen. and the trial and the news conference or the press conference at Kratz and all that. To me, it's just all hand in hand, you know. Yeah. It's a well-oiled machine when they want to get a narrative out that they want.
I found it. I mean, Paul, you've spoken about this issue in the past about Gundram's comment.
Well, I was about to get on to that, so that's superb, yeah.
Where he says, because he was obviously very close working with Stephen over the Avery bill for all the right reasons. And then when Stephen gets arrested the second time, he starts talking about it's you want to give him the presumption of innocence, but it's really hard to do that. I mean, that's a terrible thing for a legal person, a legal officer in terms of a representative, as a lawyer, to make statements like that. Mm-hmm. It's almost like saying the presumption of innocence is fine if I think it's worthy, right? It's a selective presumption of innocence. That's just awful thing for someone in his right position to say. Even if he thought Stephen was guilty, he should never utter those words.
Yeah. And if you follow that through, I actually did the whole clip rather than just that little bit of Mark Gundram. There's another thing there he says later on, because Robert Herman says, the other side of it is that, if they'd have never let Stephen out for the first thing, would Teresa still be around? And ironically, of course, yes, of course, if Steve had never got out, then there would have been no need to frame Steve. And likewise, the other side of it is, if you hadn't have wrongfully convicted him the first time, there would have been no need for Teresa to go missing. But then Gundram chimes in with the fact that, we met the fella, and it's hard to believe that, here was a guy that looked as if he had all the, showed all the emotions of a normal human being, and yet we discover he's this monster, or words to that effect. It's like. On the one hand, I'm really annoyed at Mark Gundram, and then on the other hand, I realise that, of course, from his point of view, he's done all this to try and help Steve, set up this 450,000. I mean, the Wisconsin statute at the moment is still this 25,000 maximum. Mm-hmm. It's still in place, apparently. Right. So then he's trying to trying to be helpful for Steve. Then Steve is arrested. You can imagine from Mark Gundram, from his political point of view, he's going, oh hell, I'm the front man, and now they're trying to take me down. So I've got to come out and be all bullish about it, And then of course he's now ended up with huge egg on his face because he's one of the judges in his district too.
Yeah, but I all that dynamic might happen. But to be honest, I see that as a little bit of a possibility with Giesbrecht as well. He came out supporting, and then there's hidden ways people communicate, or there's subtle ways to influence people, and I got that feeling about Mike Giesbrecht too. But you know what? On that just note, T1 had a comment there about. The public was leaning. A lot of people thought he was innocent, and then you come to that press conference and that continuum. It's the one way they, like I say, they change people's minds just through repetition of that. I think there was a quote in Making a Murder about every time the news story came on, they repeat the crimes that Stephen Avery has allegedly done, but people don't hear that. They just hear that's what he's associated with. They picture him in the prison uniform, and so it's like this brainwashing. That's really what news is. But
absolutely,
yeah.
Although, having said that, as we know, the jury, when they first considered, 7 in favour, and how did that all change? Could it have been a lot due to this Carl Waldman, who was a volunteer Manitowoc officer, but also we're finding out, aren't we, about the fact that the jury is deliberating, and who's in the room with them? None other than Jerry Pagel.
Yeah, he presented himself at the restaurant on the first night of deliberations. They went to a restaurant in Chilton for dinner, and Jerry Park was in the room with them. He's not sitting down at the table eating pizza, but he's standing there. He should never be anywhere near any of the jurors.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, that's a visual bullying going on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And here's the thing: is that I think it was some other time I was commenting on a video, but that's the thing with this case. Everything needs a little push. You see, you can't hold on its own. Everything needs a little. The key's got to be found later. You got to have people in the jury room. Whatever it is, whatever those 80 more things are, they all needed a little bump up. Nothing could stand on its own. And I was just a few minutes ago, I was reflecting, because some of the stuff I haven't thought about, like the press conference for a year, that used to be the big thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, oh man. And now that we've done all this research, half the stuff that's in the documentary isn't even the big stuff,
No, that's right.
It's amazing that it's been this 5 years that we've been slogging along,
Yeah.
Yeah, I must admit, I wonder what Jerry Pargo was doing there, whether it was a case of, in America, you've got to have this unanimous verdict. And was it a case of trying to find out a little bit more about the people on the jury?
No, they would have done their homework long before then, Paul.
Yeah, but to actually know what they're, what they're saying, what they're thinking, what they're like.
Well, if you don't think that some of the more, I won't name them, but some of the more less than independent jurors didn't have regular phone contact with other people each evening. All the jurors were only locked up during deliberation. Every day of the trial, they got put on a bus, taken to a car park about 5 miles from Chilton. They got in their cars and drove home to their various houses in Manitowoc. Yes. They're all Manitowoc citizens.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they're instructed not to watch the news and not to talk to people about the case. Do you think that really happened? But of course not.
Yeah.
So they would have been regularly updated on who is it that they're concerned about on the jury that mightn't be persuaded to Stephen's guilt.
Well,
and I 7 of them. So
I think we know one juror that would not have voted against Steve.
Well, I know more than one. So
yeah.
And they were threatened. They were subtly threatened by the statement that if you don't believe Stephen Avery is guilty, you're saying the police did it, which is not the logical alternate position, nor was it argued by the defence that it was the police. But they were saying if you don't believe Stephen did it, then you're saying the police did it. And if you say that, you wouldn't want to be living in this town after this is over. That's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And for some people, that's scary.
It should be, because actually the case is an indication of what they can do to you.
Yeah. And that's how they came up. They came up with the seemingly irreconcilable decision about mutilation of a corpse.
Yeah.
On the hope that might the ones who wanted Stephen found guilty capitulated on that to get them to the ones who wanted him not guilty to get them to switch their vote.
Yeah.
And the ones who wanted him not guilty were hoping that almost contradictory decision would be enough to get him a new trial. Mm. Well, that was naive and in fact illegal. You're not supposed to trade votes or have that and any of that go on.
Yeah.
But they're too scared to speak out. That's basically the bottom line.
So you reckon it's more than one then?
Oh, absolutely. I know. I've spoken to 2 others. Right. They tell the same story. Yeah. So they don't want to come forward, though. I can tell you that.
Well, unless they're subpoenaed, I suppose.
Well, you can't tell them. What are they going to subpoena them to do? What?
Well, to tell the truth as to why they voted in favour of guilt.
Well, that might be the case in the circumstances of a civil suit, but they'll probably be fearful of being found in contempt of court themselves.
Yeah, but that the fear of the police, and that I don't know. I got a good idea that there's a whole culture there that runs generations.
Yeah.
You don't mess around with it. And so it's like, some people call it the lafia, right? Instead of the mafia. It's, and so it's like that. It's not something you do. They've made their examples years ago that held true. And so, and I think that's part of it. I think if Stephen was allowed to sue them back in the day, that was going to be a big chink in that power, the intimidation. Yeah. And so that's what they did, That's what I think,
No, that's true. Yeah. I mean, you wonder, I often think about this, had the law enforcement been aware of the existence of what was being created at the time, i.e. the documentary Making a Murderer, and assuming that they had no power to thwart that, I wonder if their behavior would have changed, right? In other words, they have in the end got ambushed in 2015, not realizing their behavior was being documented from 10 years previous, right? So,
they would have changed one thing. They would have arrested the filmmakers.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I'm so jaded because I mean, you just look at that whole area and you just go, I mean, that's the thing for me. All these years, watching the supporters, the groups grow and shrink and all that stuff. And the more you read about it, I don't immerse myself in it anymore. But for those first 3 years, it's just so blatant to me. It's tough to have an optimist or like an objective benefit of the doubt look at that particular law enforcement group. I just can't. Mm-hmm. And it stems up straight to Fassbender, etc. It's not just the Manitowoc, but all those people involved. I just can't help but think they were all on the same tunnel vision.
Absolutely, they were. Yeah. No question about that. No question. Yeah. As is often said, indeed Kathleen Zellner says it, but it's true generally, is as soon as you find one level of deceit, it opens up the possibility for all levels of deceit. So, you only have to look at just one fanciful thing like, Colburn's representation of the cabinet that he had to shake and twist and bend, etc. And then, but in the photos, everything's, neatly sitting back there on the floor with the coins and the books and whatever. I mean, that is just the biggest BS story. But if they're prepared to do that, right, then they're prepared to do anything, right? So that's the bottom line for me. And that's just one example of 80 more things, right? So they've disclosed their code of colours in the way they conduct themselves, and they've been called to account on it, and obviously they don't like it. So,
and that's the thing I think is so interesting on a legal cross-examination point of view. I would just love to have Andrew Colborn answer those questions. I'd love for Ken Kratz to answer some questions. Like real. That would be a pay-per-view worth watching.
Well, the other thing is that if they get them into a civil suit, right, and they have to give depositions, it's much more freer discussion then. And so, we saw how people like, Mr. Pencil and that squirmed his deposition. When you're in a civil suit and there's no criminal possibilities, then you have a much freer opportunity to ask questions that you might be otherwise more difficult to ask in a criminal case.
Right.
So, so that'll be high level viewing when that happens. So,
do either of you have an idea of or guess on when we'll hear something?
Well, I was always hoping we might hear something by Christmas. Clearly, that didn't happen. But I think it's probably more likely, I'd say February, late January, February, because there's no reason to keep delaying it. There's no reason. Right. The arguments have been out there for 2 and 3 years.
Yeah.
There's no reason to delay it. So,
I suppose the only thing is though that from a fairness point of view, they can't seem to be fast tracking certain cases, much as we'd like that to happen, and maybe it should happen. Maybe based on the fact that I think it's Tracy Struntz, you worked out that based on the fact that there was a case recently that came before the Court of Appeals, the Second District, working on that same sort of gap that she was thinking around about April time.
Yeah.
That would be my only sort of thought. But they have to.
I don't think it's going to be before the 20th. That's for sure, of January. They'll do the transition of power. We'll go through that whole thing, and then on the president level, and then something. Yeah, maybe hopefully in February. That would be awesome. But
as you say, I mean, there's no reason why they can't. I mean, Paul Riley has been looking at this case for, well, as you say, 2 years now. He's seen what's going on, and you could tell by the tone of his reports he wasn't very impressed. And I hope that Mark Gundrum is having an input into the what happens next. And he actually does the right thing, because I remember, as I say, his daughter Bernadette actually made comment on one of the videos saying, you've got my dad wrong. He was duped the same as everybody else by the Krenkratz press comments.
Right.
Well,
so
now that he's on the Court of Appeals, he's got tenure, right? So he doesn't have to worry. Nor that he should have ever had to worry, but he doesn't have to worry about the political process of getting re-elected, right? He's on there. So,
maybe we could crowdsource some money and send them all flowers.
Yes. What do you reckon? That'd be different. Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to go back, to something you were talking about, and that is the obviously particularly Brendan and this sort of interrogation process, and how you feel that Making a Murderer, and I suppose to a certain extent all the other documentaries that we've seen about wrongful conviction, will ultimately end up changing the system over there in America, the interrogation system. I mean, what do you consider to be the worst aspect of the interrogation system in America, and how to fix it?
Did you want to go first, Stacy?
Sure. I don't. I mean, I have the basic one is the interrogation of youth. I think that's changing right now, and I think Brendan Dassey's case really is a great example to further that cause. So every youth is videotaped and has to have an adult. All those things. On the larger scale, it's kind of interesting because there's such a huge interest in these type of shows now, and you wonder, will it change? Does it instigate change in the real world, or do people become more just sedentary watchers and become desensitized to it? I don't know how it's going to turn out. That, to be honest, the United States right now, being a neighbor to the north, it just seems it's really ungrounded right now, and so they have so many issues right now that who knows what will happen.
Sure.
Yeah.
I agree with Stacy. If we break it into youth juveniles, they should all be audioed and videotaped, and have a responsible person, not a parent. I don't think a parent is an appropriate person, because they don't know the law.
Right.
They need to have an advocate, a legal advocate who has a duty of care under the law to advocate the best interests for the person, and that also be all recorded. At least that way, if you had that person in Brendan's case, that person would have told Brendan not to answer 99.9% of the questions, because they were incriminating questions. And if, in the absence of that, in other words, if they didn't have the confession, they have no case against Brendan. Arguably not a case against Stephen either, for that matter. But in any event, you could have nipped Brendan's issue right in the bud by having that level of judicial care, which he's entitled to, by the way, but they just didn't afford it to him. And to suggest that he waived his Miranda rights as if he knew what that meant is just ridiculous. On the adult side, I think if I go really deep on the adult side, the problem will not be solved big picture wise until there's a restoration of better equity in the United States. The lack of equity creates a lot of criminal behavior in the US, or behavior that's not socially acceptable. And the fact that you've got the rate of incarceration going on in the US that you do have at levels 5 times the rate of what's in my country, and Paul, in yours, I'm not quite sure what it's compared to the Canada, Stacy, but the fact that you have that incarceration tells you that the system is wrong. There's something wrong with the system. And there needs to be, at a really deep level, a real look at the equitable way in which US citizens are treated by its own government. And that's not an easy thing to answer. It's like a generational thing. But once you have that, and you have less people getting locked up than they are now, and you have all this private interest in prison populations, then we might see some significant change. But along the way, there's still a ample opportunity for reform in areas like immunity, for example, prosecutorial immunity, and an obligation for the system to deal with matters expeditiously, or at least in reasonable periods of time. Anyway, so there's kind of the things you can do now and the things that need like a really deeper reform. So
the reason I asked the question is because, as you know, Yusuf Salam was one of the Central Five, and he recently put out a post that I read. And it's good. This, the article was in the Brooklyn paper, and it was new Central Park 5 law requires cops to videotape juvenile interrogations. And I couldn't help replying to him with the fact that, sadly, Yusuf, even videoing interrogations can lead to false confessions and wrongful convictions. So, it's interesting, isn't it? You were talking about this sort of cognitive dissonance of Andy Colburn saying, I shut the cabinet, I twisted it, and the key popped out. Even people like these supposed learned judges, the 4 judges on the en banc panel, were able to watch Brendan Dassey's interview, and still, even though the evidence is there, who shot her in the head? Oh, he did. Well, why didn't you say that? I couldn't think of it. It's like they'll still come up with excuses. So I just wonder if the big thing, as I'm reading through Richard Leo's book, he talks about the history of interrogation going way to, when they used to, put, the witch trials, and, put people on the rack and do all sorts of things to try and get a confession to them. Trying to develop the ultimate lie detector test would be a great achievement, and brain fingerprinting is one of those things that is very good. But a lot of people to me, you must watch Don't Lie to Me, that sort of Netflix documentary. It's not here in the UK. I can't find it. But for me, the big thing was Jerry Buting at the end of the first hearing said, in America, it's the only English-speaking country in the world where interrogators or investigators are allowed to lie to people in interrogations. Surely that, for me, is the big, the big thing. You're trying to develop this lie detector test so that you can tell when somebody's being truthful, and you're lying to them, and you're allowed to do that, and they call it this bluffing as if it's some sort of, it's nothing really bad. Well, it's bloody awful, isn't it?
Yeah.
How would they have got on with Brendan's interrogation had they not been allowed to lie?
But the Paul would not, and obviously I think that's almost self-evident, the answer to that question. But
yep.
Anyone for that matter, but particularly people like Brendan, youth, they should never have been allowed to be in the presence of law enforcement officers answering such questions without a legal representative present. Full stop. There shouldn't be a question of waiving your Miranda rights. That shouldn't even be permitted.
But that's the first of the 9 steps in conducting an interrogation, is to get somebody by themselves so that they don't have anybody alongside with them. Although in Brendan's case, I fear that had Kaczynski been there, they would have done as well anyway. Because I don't think Kaczynski
he would have been on the record then. He would have been on the record of ineffective assistance of counsel, right?
Yeah,
that's the difference, right?
Sure.
And that would have been enough to render his so-called confessions invalid.
Right.
So that's the point.
Oh, well.
And,
I think that's what's going to happen in law enforcement. But you can always have someone manipulate. You know, I think eventually all law enforcement will have body cams. I think all things will be videotaped, but that doesn't ensure any. You know, there still could be manipulation or lost film or whatever. You know, inadvertent deleting of files or whatever. But I think that's the way the United States is going to go. I don't know. To be honest, it feels like the United States is on the precipice of a real monumental change, and on all levels, you know. And so I wish them luck. You know, being so close to me in Canada, you have, and so many friends there. You know, you just hope they get through it with the least amount of pain, because it certainly looks like a dysfunctional system in general, the whole country right now. So, but hopefully, maybe it turns around, you know. But who knows?
I think the somewhat simplistic analogy I always make, Stacy, if you're smart enough to send a man to the moon, or a rocket to Mars, or whatever it is that you're proud of your achievements, why can't you get your own criminal justice system right that applies to everyone? They seem to be happy to be lulled into living on history, not on advancement.
But like you say, it's it's a prison system set up on private enterprise, and so maybe the system is working perfectly for those who designed it. You know, and so, but for the people, it's hey, who knows? I mean, it's obviously too big of a question to answer here, because it's not fixed. People have been trying for years and years, but
But you know, the power exists in the hands of the voters, and even it was good to see so many more voters came out in the recent presidential election, but we still only had 60% of eligible voters vote.
Right.
Mark Wiegert got elected in the county of Calumet with 2,000 votes as sheriff, right? I presume there must have been at least potentially something like, I don't know, I don't really know, so I shouldn't guess, but there's probably potentially at least 20 or 1,000 people eligible to vote. You need to own democracy. It's not something you just sit back and take. You go and own it and participate in it.
But once again, those people in the lower ends of the scale economically, they just get pushed around by so many things.
Exactly.
So, and so I actually, this round of elections, I heard some tweets and sort of things, them floating the idea of election day being a holiday so people can vote. But, back to Brendan and Stephen, it's, I just think we should focus on starting to think about, rather than the corruption and the inequalities there, but we got to start focusing on the positive of those guys getting out and Kathleen moving forward, and because I got caught up in the whole negativity with all the songs. I look back at the songs that I wrote, and they're all focusing on the negative in a way, even though it's good to do, but I try to force myself now to think, oh, you know what? Stephen's going to get out this year. That'd be so cool to see that happen, walk through doors, or that decision coming down from the Court of Appeals. I try and focus on that stuff now, because there is so much, you start looking at any system, there's always stuff to fix. So it gets overwhelming sometimes.
I mean, and Stephen, is the type of person who would be a wonderful advocate for reform, because he's not a selfish person. He's very in tune with those around him and his community around him, and we expect him to get out. If he gets out, he won't hold any grudges. He'll just want to get on with life. He'll have a view about what happened to him, and he'll obviously participate in some civil case, but he won't be an angry man. He'll just be a resolute man to move forward. And in that sense, he'll be a good example of being positive rather than being negative. So,
I mean, it'll just be so interesting to see that. It'll be the history replaying it. So he'll be out again, and he'll go. It's almost like Groundhog Day type thing.
Yeah.
He's just older, and we'll see.
Yeah.
So we had a bit.
It's getting late for me here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you need to go.
Yeah, it's after midnight now. So I appreciate you doing this, Paulie, and I love seeing both of you. And
you too, Stace. Always good to see you, mate.
Too bad Richard's not around to be there. He's definitely in the mine now and again, eh?
Oh, always. Yeah.
It's like I hear him. I literally,
He's such a larger than life figure. I don't really genuinely don't feel he's not around, right?
Right. Yeah,
I don't see him in the same way. I see Paul's gone and stole his studio from him.
Yeah.
And which is, I guess that's to honor him. And Paul Captain Crunch in the background is still drunk, leaning over in the corner there.
Yeah.
So,
ever since he got taken out by that Aussie and round a few of the bars in Southern California.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
I'll hear a song of mine, or I'll listen to it, or I'll play it, and I can still hear him singing the parts he would sing. Like I would.
That's right.
And, that's horrendous. I feel very sorry for you.
I like it actually. I like the memories. That was he was a great supporter, and when he did sing the songs that he liked, he really felt them too. He loved them, and I miss that guy. Yeah, so
he was really deep into history. He had a really philosophical way of looking at things, even though he's loud and large in terms of his voice, and there was a foundation in sort of ethics and history and an understanding for a better world. It's a very admirable thing about Richard. And we still hear it. In fact, Paul, I think in one of your future little things, you should replay that. I'm sure you'll have it or be able to find it somehow. That when Richard was forced to sing "God Save the Queen."
Oh no!
Actually, I use that. That's my ringtone now.
Oh God! Seriously.
Right. So I gotta go, you guys. Nice seeing you.
And
you too, mate.
And we'll chat again, eh?
Take care, Stacey.
Yeah.
Okay. Night.
Yep.
See you, mate.
Still here, Paul? Yeah, that video is called Mock Punishment Court or something like that.
That's right.
It's. I mean, I look every now and again. I still hear his voice, and I hear him saying, that line from The Big Lebowski, where he goes, "Oh, shut the up, Donnie."
That's right.
No, it was very sad that when you think of the people that in the sort of truther community that were sort of close to the ones that that the dude knew, and myself with before that Denise Rainey and Ziggy, and it's not nice how things have gone on. But anyway, Mark, I'm going to let you go and put another shrimp on the barbie. I noticed Dr. Stoltman was out to his barbie, so it's raining there.
Yeah, it's really grey and wet outside. You might have heard some thunder a little while ago. So, but it's only 7 p.m. and it should be really light outside right now, but it's quite dark. So, at least where I live anyway. So, hey, Paul, thanks for all the work you're doing, mate, and always good to speak with you. And thanks to all the supporters who have been online commenting along the way. Hopefully we'll catch up again soon and have a good chin wag about whatever's going on. So thanks again anyway, mate, and all the best for the new year. So
yeah. Okay. Cheers, mate.
Okay, take care.
Catch you soon. Yeah. Uru.
Bye. Uru.
Uru.
Bye.